We have long accepted that the mainstream media is biased, and perhaps we're not too surprised by that. It is largely owned by billionaires and controlled ultimately in some cases by the government. So it's not really surprising that individuals with opinions that are amenable or appeasable to those kind of organisations would rise to the top. And at the same time, we know that big corporates and governments spend a fortune on PR organisations to try to present what's going on in the most flattering possible light for them, and also to do things like slipping out bad news on big news days, etc., etc. We have to acknowledge now that it's gone way past that. At this point, the mainstream media is nothing more than an instrument of disaster capitalist propaganda. So earlier this week, we saw Gary Lineker being threatened with coming off the air for sharing what is not really an opinion about the migrant crisis, but really just a fact, really just simply stating the facts of the matter. And it's simply not the case that the BBC is dedicated to being impartial, because firstly, if you're going to be impartial, you should start with the facts. And secondly, they themselves share all kinds of obnoxious and untrue and unfounded, skewed news stories about migrants in the UK. At the same time, we've got the budget has come out, and the focus from the media has been on small changes to pension provisions. It has been on the potential provision of childcare, which is not clear whether that's really going to happen or how that's going to happen. And there's been almost no focus on the fact that all the statistics show that what's going to happen over the next couple of years as a result of this budget is that the average household in the UK is going to be thousands of pounds less well off. Disposable incomes are going to fall through the floor. And when that happens, we will inevitably be affected, throughout the whole economic cycle. People have less disposable income, they're able to spend less money on stuff that they need, and that means that people whose job is to sell or provide those things that they need will have less money coming in. The whole thing is set to absolutely tank our economy all over again, and the mainstream media are not reporting on it. One of the most tragic ones that I've seen this week is a BBC story that says that the cost of living crisis has led to some people contemplating suicide. But it is them and other media outlets that have used the term cost of living crisis fed to them by the government. There's no cost of living crisis. It's not too expensive to be alive. That is horrendously dangerous propaganda. The fact is that most of the inflation that we're experiencing is directly explained by increased corporate profits. The fact is that the billionaires are getting richer. The gap between those that can afford everything and those that can afford nothing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There is no scarcity of stuff to go round. There's enough food, there's enough accommodation, there's enough energy for everybody. What is going on is a cost of greed crisis, but people haven't been told that. People haven't understood that. And people are sat there contemplating suicide because they have been led to believe by the media that being alive is now too expensive. And at the same time, I made a few comments on Twitter in support of Gary Lineker and in support of Caroline Lucas, who had ripped up the immigration bill in a reading in the House of Commons. And the reaction on Twitter has been hundreds of people furiously demanding that I explain how on earth we can possibly afford to let all these migrants into our country and at the same time still solve all the problems that they see going on in our country. And I get it, because the mainstream media has allowed us to believe that there is some kind of choice between your child having a free school meal and letting people come in to the UK from overseas. And the reality is, firstly, that migrants to the UK are net contributors. They contribute to our economy more than they take out. That's just a fact. I'm also being told that migrants to the UK are overwhelmingly criminals, that they're all going to attack and rape us and all this kind of stuff. And that's because the mainstream media is failing to report that in actual fact, those born in Britain have a higher rate of committing crimes than those who've come to the UK from overseas. That's just a thing that is true. But facts are not making it out the door in our media. And I'm also being told that these migrants have no legitimate case to be here, etc., that they should have stopped in the first safe country, which in fact there is no legal requirement for them to do. That's an absolute myth. But we have a mainstream media that is not covering these stories and instead is allowing us to all feel like we're fighting for the tiny scraps of what is left, and nobody is talking about what is really going on and where all the wealth in our economy has been sucked out and where it's gone. And if the mainstream media told the truth, people wouldn't be contemplating suicide. They'd be contemplating revolution. In the meantime, alternative ways of getting the news and alternative ways of looking at what's going on in our society are super important. And as such, I want to say thank you again to those who are able to sponsor these videos. And if you're thinking about doing so, please step up and do it. It doesn't matter if you just do it for a few months or whatever, and then you need to step down again. I will still super appreciate your contributions, and you'll get loads of super bonus content as well. And thank you again, and I will see you next week.